Hey there everybody, so today I'm going to get into one of two videos that I'm going to be doing about resistance to transatlantic empires. Empires like the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch. And really my aim for both this video and then the next video that I'm going to do about Queen Anna Nzinga in Africa is try to get across the point that the Europeans really didn't just show up and roll everybody, okay? Their dominance of the world took centuries to actually complete, and most people simply didn't just sit there and say, okay, we're going to get conquered and call it a day. And in fact, sometimes they would get conquered and they would rise up to push out the conquerors for at least a short period of time. And the theme, if you will, here is resistance, is that we need to understand that there were a variety of different groups and individuals that were able to lead resistances against these expanding empires from Europe, okay? And so today I'm going to specifically get into the Pueblo Revolt, which was a form of Native American resistance in North America. And so just a brief description, this is going to be something also known as Pope's or Pope's Rebellion. This is when most of the indigenous Pueblo people, who I'll explain who they are more in a moment, rise up against the Spanish in present-day New Mexico, or as that at that time was known as Santa Fe de Nuevo Mexico. Now, the Pueblo are a large group of people, okay? And I'm going to be talking about different tribal groups and who made up the Pueblo, but what you see here are basically just some large groups of settlements right here. Okay, Chaco Canyon, probably one of the most famous, Mesa Verde in Colorado. But this is the area that made up the ancestral Pueblo. We're going to primarily be talking about over here in New Mexico. You also had some other groups as well, but it's important to understand that the Pueblo aren't any one single tribe. It's going to be multiple groups of tribes of people that came together to try to resist specifically the Spanish. And let's just get some basic background. So as the Spanish were moving into this area, there were a series of violent conflict. And if I want you to see over here on the left, so here is Mexico, and this was the Provincia de Nuevo Mexico. So this is the area that we're talking about, modern day New Mexico, a little bit Arizona, a little bit of Colorado, and even a smidge of Utah as well. Probably the biggest one was the Tigo War, in which Francisco Coronado, who was the famous conqueror of this area, was just absolutely brutal to the Tiwa people, who are one of the Pueblo groups of people. And this was a brutal war that was fought. Coronado was able to come out on top, and the Spanish were able to conquer the area. Now, later on, there was a earlier revolt, which was known as the Acoma Pueblo Revolt, but this was absolutely brutal. Juan de Onate, who there is a picture of him over here, was called in by the Spanish to reconquer the area, and he will kill and enslave hundreds of people, as well as all men who took part in the revolution who were over the age of 25 were required to have one of their feet chopped off. So this area is one of resistance and one of brutal violence, in particular by the Spanish. All right, and this is something that we need to understand was already established in this area. Now, I have here what was orders versus what was happened. So the Spanish royal policy, so these are the orders of the Spanish crown, was that natives were to be treated humanely, specifically on the frontier, and specifically, they really want them to be Christianized. That's the goal, all right? The reality wasn't really that at all. The Pueblo people were forced to provide tribute to the Spanish, typically in the form of labor, crops like corn, or even textiles. And they also were restricted to their natural resources. Most notably, the Spanish heavily restricted their access to water in the area. Now, this area, of course, known as for being relatively dry, and this was a way for the Spanish to try to control them, but also a way to kind of breed resentment, because the key thing we need is water, of course, for life and crops and stuff like that. And then the Spanish were really reducing the access that people had to it. And so you have this combination here of, the Spanish crown said what they were supposed to do, and the locals just really didn't do it at all. Part of this also is going to be a religious conflict as well, okay? The Pueblo people in general are very, very religious. They did not take kindly to an encroachment, particularly with the Franciscan monks that were sent in here. The Franciscans were basically put in charge of settlements and a variety of different villages that they tended to rule in a kind of like a theocratic type of government here, and it was very, very strict, and it wasn't going well. And so initially, actually, what the monks will start to do is create a compromise. So if some of the Pueblo would allow themselves to be baptized and attended Mass, they were generally left alone at home. And so some of the traditional things that they were able to do, certain dances, certain religious rites, which I'll mention more in a moment, they were just left alone. It was totally cool. It's like, all right, well, we'll hang out in your church for a while, but you'll leave us alone. But eventually, they being the Spanish, decide that isn't going to be the way things are done. And as time went on, they saw things become banned. Most notably, there were the Kachina dances, which you see a picture there on the right, which is an ancestral dance. That was banned. And a number of their ceremonies were banned as well. Many of these ceremonies called for the use of certain psychoactive drugs in them. The Spanish decided they didn't like that and thus started to ban certain practices. And so you have, they're being restricted on resources. They're not allowed to use or to participate in these very important ceremonies, and we just see these things building and building. Finally, we get to two main things that really just break it all down. First and foremost, there's a drought and famine. Already you have restrictions of water use and other types of resources, and now you have people that are dying as a result. And again, we see this all throughout history. A lot of revolutions often begin after some other type of period of stress, and droughts and famines are very common periods of stress that get people to a breaking point because they're oppressed and they're dying, and so they're, if we don't make a change, we're going to die anyway, so why not? The other issue is that at one point, 47 medicine men were arrested for practicing sorcery. 4 were executed, and the rest were beaten and jailed. This is actually going to be the first mounted resistance that they will then do, they being the Pueblo. They actually march to the governor's office and demand the release of the prisoners. They will end up getting most of them released, and one that gets released is a man who goes by the name of Pope or Pope. I've kind of seen both. Don't quote me. I think it's Pope, and that's what I'm going to kind of go with, and hopefully I'm right. Pope was probably the most important guy there. Now, we don't know much about him. We know he is going to be the key orchestrator of the revolt. We do know that some other men were involved, but we know that he was kind of the guy at the top. And so the first thing that he is going to look to do is look to get a confederation of these Pueblo people that are willing to fight the Spanish. And the groups that he get, and again, I go here, so you have the Northern Tiwa, the Tewa, the Tiwo, the Taino, the Keres, the Pecos, the Zuni, and the Hopi. Now, he doesn't get every single one of those people, but these are the major tribes that are willing to come together to actually fight the Spanish. And so the basic goal was to rise up in the area of modern-day New Mexico and kill or expel the Spanish, and then move in force to Santa Fe. Santa Fe is the only sizable town in the region and basically controls everything. So the goal is you're going to rise up in these areas. This is a coordinated attack, so a bunch of different attacks all at the same time. We're going to rise up, and then boom, we'll eventually move on Santa Fe. Now, it was supposed to occur on August 11th, 1680, but some of the runners who were taking messages back and forth between the groups were captured and tortured to reveal some of the plans. So Pope decided to start a day early, and on August 10th, 1680, boom, the revolt happens. And early on, they have incredible amounts of success. The Spanish are driven out of every single village in New Mexico. Santa Fe was under siege, and after just 3 days of siege, and the official date of that would be August 21st, 1680, the governor, Antoni de Alterman, makes a push to get out of the city, and he does, and then actually flees New Mexico. And they win. It's absolutely incredible. And here we have a revolt that is successful. That a lot of times, that doesn't happen. Now, Pope's goal was to really unite this area into one giant confederation and almost the concept of a country. He's kind of the leader of this for about a year, but not much is known that happens after him. All we know is that he wanted kind of this country to be formed, and the goal was to drive all Europeans out of the region and keep them out. All the way down to the point where we don't want to use any European crops, obviously no Christianity. Unfortunately, though, he is not able to do this. And then in 1692, Pope dies, which is a big deal because when he dies, you don't quite have the leadership there that you had during the rebellion. Now, eventually, the Spanish are going to return. Slowly but surely, they will re-advance. They are led by, and that will start in late 1692 after Pope is dead. They will be led by a man by the name of Diego de Vargas. And initially, the whole idea is they're going to move in force and get the Pueblo to try to just accept Spanish rule. So have a little bit of give and take there. But by 1693, that's not working well. So he goes in with more military means. And it's really brutal. He'll kill any men who resist as well as enslave their families. And unfortunately, the organization that they had during the rebellion, they just don't have here. And by 1700, the area will be completely regained and the Spanish will continue to grow. And as you can see here, they start in this area. This was, going there and just pushing and pushing up and pushing up. So reconquering this out to California, over here, in modern day Texas, and it's all done. However, the legacy here is important to understand that this isn't something that the Spanish just show up and it's all over. There was routine resistance, and understand that, within about 120 years of this point, you're going to start to see the process of the Spanish actually losing these areas. The locals will rise up. You will see the Latin American freedom movements. You have one in Mexico. You have Simón Bolívar and other groups in South America. And this was one of really the big ones. So it's important to understand that there was constant resistance to these groups. It wasn't as easy as one often makes it, and the Pueblo were a great example of that. All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm looking forward to making the next one.